The day was scorching, and the South Pacific seemed deceptively calm. On September 15, 1942, Captain Forrest P. Sherman of the USS Wasp oversaw routine operations following the successful reinforcement of Guadalcanal. The morning had seen anti-submarine patrols and a downed Japanese aircraft, but by 3 p.m., the tranquil scene shattered. "Torpedoes to starboard!" a lookout shouted, his voice urgent. Captain Sherman spun to see the deadly wake of 3 torpedoes hurtling toward Wasp. He quickly barked his orders. A sharp starboard turn. It was their only chance to evade the torpedoes, as USS Wasp's most critical moment had just arrived. I want to give a big thanks to Odoo, who have been sponsoring this channel for a while now. One of the tools I use to streamline running this channel is Odoo, the ultimate all-in-one management software that makes running your business a breeze. From invoicing and accounting to project management and website creation, Odoo has everything you need to simplify your operations. With Odoo's website builder, you can craft a stunning website tailored to your needs. Easily customize blocks with images, text, videos, and animations. Leveraging Odoo's AI integration, you can generate and fine-tune content to ensure your website stands out, and add features like a web shop or news feed as your business grows. Your first Odoo application is free for life, including unlimited hosting and support, plus a free personalized domain for 1 year. This means you can start building your website today without any upfront costs. Visit the link in the description to start your free website today and experience the power of a truly intuitive management platform. In 1942, the US faced a 2-front war with severe losses in the Pacific Fleet. Although they shook Japanese overconfidence with the Doolittle raid on Tokyo and the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway, Japan still had both the fleet and manpower to be cause for worry. The Battle of the Coral Sea was a significant shift as it marked the first naval battle, where aircraft carriers were the primary combatants, rather than battleships. The real turning point came in June at the Battle of Midway, where Japan lost 4 carriers, a critical blow that shifted the momentum in the Pacific. These defeats underscored the growing importance of aircraft carriers in naval warfare, as they became the central element in projecting power and conducting battles across vast ocean distances. Among these carriers that would be crucial in determining the outcome of the war was the uniquely designed and quite different USS Wasp. The Washington Naval Treaty, signed between 1921 and 1922, limited the size and tonnage of warships and navies of major powers. The US Navy, restricted to 135,000 tons for aircraft carriers, decided to build the smaller Wasp with the remaining tonnage, leading to compromises in its design. As a result, Wasp had low power propulsion, light armor, modest speed, and no torpedo protection, making her highly vulnerable. Launched in April 1939 and commissioned in April 1940, Wasp was the first carrier with a deck-edge elevator for aircraft. Early service included training and carrier qualification tests, with notable pilots like David McCampbell. After its commissioning, the USS Wasp quickly moved from shakedown operations to key wartime roles. In March 1941, the carrier rescued the crew of the schooner George E. Clink amid a storm. Following repairs and upgrades, including radar installation, Wasp participated in training missions and neutrality patrols. By July 1941, it was involved in transporting Army Air Forces planes to Iceland. In April 1942, Wasp began supporting Malta convoys with Operation Calendar, delivering Spitfires to Malta despite losses. This mission was followed by Operation Bowery, where Wasp, with HMS Eagle, delivered additional Spitfires to bolster Malta's defense. But during this time, war in the Pacific continued as well. In the wake of intense Battle of the Coral Sea and the subsequent Battle of Midway, where the aircraft carriers Lexington and Yorktown were lost, the US Pacific Fleet faced a critical shortage of carriers. As a result, Wasp was urgently transferred to the Pacific Fleet. She returned to the US for repairs and alterations at the Norfolk Navy Yard and joined Task Force 37 as Captain Forrest Sherman took command before setting sail for the Pacific Theater, just in time for one of the major operations of the war. In early August, the United States launched the Guadalcanal campaign to halt Japanese advances and secure strategic positions in the Solomon Islands. The goal was to prevent Japan from establishing a fortified perimeter around their Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, thereby safeguarding vital Allied supply routes and setting the stage for future offensives in the Pacific. Wasp provided critical air support for the initial landings on Guadalcanal. Her aircraft successfully attacked Japanese positions and aircraft, aiding the invasion's success despite mechanical issues that limited her speed. Wasp continued operations in the Solomon Islands, providing air support and engaging in patrols. She missed the Battle of the Eastern Solomon, where the carrier Enterprise was heavily damaged. She had to retreat to Pearl Harbor. This left Task Force 61 under Admiral Fletcher temporarily weakened. To bolster defenses, Task Forces 17 and 18, centered around the carriers Hornet and Wasp, were deployed to the Solomons. This task force was tasked with countering Japanese advances and providing air cover for supply convoys. However, the fixed patrol patterns made them vulnerable to Japanese reconnaissance. Captain Davis of the Enterprise recommended varying their locations and speeds to avoid detection. Despite these warnings, the Saratoga was torpedoed on August 31st by the Japanese submarine I-26. The damage was severe, but the carrier managed to reach Pearl Harbor for repairs. As such, by the end of August, with only Wasp and the newly commissioned Hornet available in the Southwest Pacific, Wasp's role became increasingly crucial in maintaining Allied air superiority in the ongoing conflict. That morning, Wasp, alongside the Hornet, North Carolina, and 10 other warships, finished escorting transports carrying reinforcements to Guadalcanal, positioned about 150 nautical miles southeast of San Cristobal Island. Wasp was engaged in refueling and rearming aircraft for anti-submarine patrols. The reinforcements landed successfully, and the ships carried on their return journey. The morning had been routine, with Wasp at general quarters since before dawn. Her aircraft had been launched for anti-submarine missions and returned by 10 a.m. By early afternoon, Wasp had only encountered a Japanese 4-engined flying boat, which was downed by one of her F-4F Wildcats at 12:15. The carrier was in a relatively calm state, with her air department at flight quarters and operational readiness in condition 2. At 14:20, Wasp launched 8 Wildcats and 18 Dauntless dive bombers while recovering 8 Wildcats and 3 Dauntlesses. As the carrier completed the recovery and prepared to turn, a lookout spotted 3 torpedoes approaching from the starboard beam at 14:44. The torpedoes were fired by the Japanese submarine I-19, which launched a spread of 6 torpedoes. Wasp attempted to maneuver hard to starboard to evade the torpedoes, but it was too late. The first torpedo struck just forward of the island, the blast lifting the ship and propelling it forward. 2 F-4F fighters were flung into the sea, and hundreds of crew members were thrown from their feet. The second and third torpedoes struck in quick succession, causing the ship to leap again. On the hangar deck, planes were lifted and dropped with such force that their landing gear was crushed, and 2 fighters broke loose from their overhead restraints, crashing onto the planes below. Despite the severe damage, the US Navy's damage control equipment and training offered a glimmer of hope for survival. Captain Forrest P. Sherman skillfully maneuvered the Wasp to position the wind on her starboard quarter, directing the flames forward and to port. This allowed hundreds of crew members to seek refuge astern. Of the 6 torpedoes, 3 hit the Wasp. 1 hit the destroyer O'Brien, and another passed under the keel of the destroyer Dale, narrowly missing the stern of the destroyer Mustin, before striking the North Carolina, sending a column of water and fuel oil as high as the battleship's masts. The O'Brien's bow was torn off forward of frame 10, but she managed to limp away, although she was lost en route to the American mainland. The North Carolina's starboard side was severely damaged, but she also steamed away under her own power. Shortly thereafter, I-19 fired another spread of torpedoes at the Hornet, but they missed. The screening ships began zigzagging and dropped depth charges throughout the area, driving off the enemy submarines, but destroying none. However, the Wasp had been hit at the worst possible moment, in the most vulnerable part of her hull, near the aviation gasoline storage tanks, which exploded into incandescent flames. Having just launched planes, the fuel lines were full, and the fires spread rapidly through the hoses to the forward hangar deck. Secondary explosions quickly followed, wreaking havoc. The hangar deck turned into an inferno as fueled planes exploded. Their bombs and torpedoes detonated, and their machine guns fired haphazardly. Lieutenant Chester M. Stearns, an engineering officer, crawled to the hangar deck only to see a torpedo roasting under a burning TBF Avenger. He dived to the deck just in time to shield himself from the explosion. When he looked up, neither plane nor torpedo nor deck were there. Bombs had detonated, creating a massive hole through the elevator pit, engulfed in flames. The explosions intensified, and the fires spread uncontrollably, fueled by gasoline and munitions. With forward water mains inoperable, the crew struggled to contain the blaze. The ship listed 15 degrees to starboard, and flames spread to the water, making firefighting efforts nearly impossible. Electrical lines and fire mains were severed in the forward part of the ship. Rivets popped out like bullets, and most communication circuits were knocked out, leaving the bridge isolated from below decks. Ready service ammunition by the starboard forward anti-aircraft guns detonated, raining debris along the ship's length. At 3:05 p.m., a tremendous gasoline vapor explosion tore through the USS Wasp. Flames shot 150 feet into the sky, and a quadruple 1.1-inch anti-aircraft mount forward of the island was ripped from its foundation and hurled into the air, killing its entire crew. Admiral Lee Noyes, who had taken command of Task Force 61 only 2 weeks earlier, was thrown to the deck of his signal bridge, suffering third-degree burns on his face, scalp, and ears. Smoke engulfed the interior of the island, forcing everyone to retreat aft. Burning debris rained down on the men gathered on the flight deck. A pilot circling above reported that the Wasp's whole island structure was white, as if the skin had been burned away from the flesh. Captain Sherman, unable to manage the fire and damage, ordered the ship abandoned at 15:20. The abandonment was conducted in an orderly fashion, with priority given to evacuating the wounded. Explosions continued, with debris falling around the ship. Rescue operations were carried out by nearby destroyers, Lafay, Lansdowne, and cruisers Helena and Salt Lake City. In total, they rescued 1,946 men. Shortly after 8 o'clock, destroyers fired several torpedoes into the burning hull to ensure she sank. At 9, the Wasp rolled slightly to starboard, and the bow dipped under. She slid slowly into the sea until only her stern remained visible before disappearing entirely. The USS Hornet, now the only battle-worthy carrier left in the South Pacific, recovered all of the Wasp's 26 planes that were aloft during the attack. However, 45 more aircraft went down with the ship. The attack resulted in 193 deaths and 366 injuries. Though 25 of the carrier's 26 airborne aircraft landed safely on Hornet, 45 were lost with Wasp. The sudden and catastrophic loss of the Wasp, coupled with the constant threat of submarine attacks, finally spurred Admiral Chester Nimitz to issue new directives. He noted, "For 3 weeks, Task Force 61 and its elements remained in the same waters adjacent to our supply route to the Solomons, an area known to be infested with submarines. The mission did not require that the task force be restricted to that area. Henceforth, Nimitz commanded, the area of operations of our task forces should be changed radically at frequent intervals. This marked a strategic shift aimed at mitigating the ever-present submarine threat. On 14th January 2019, the wreck of Wasp was discovered by the research vessel Petrel, lying upright in 14,255 feet of water, with evidence of hull splitting. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.